everyone, Kareem right here, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing John Smelzer, who is the founder and president at USL Antelope Valley FC that's going to be competing in USL One. John, correct me if I'm right or wrong. The team name is not confirmed yet, right?
That's right. So we have a professional designer we're working with. We're going to do some listening sessions with the community, and then we hope to announce the official name in March, which would be 1 year out from kickoff.
Nice. Well, I want to, first thank you for joining us and taking the time today. How are you doing?
I'm good. Very busy. It's been a crazy week. We launched last week. We had a press conference and a launch party. Both were exceptionally amazing, and now we're rocking and rolling. Lots to do.
So could you, one of my favorite questions to always ask my guests is, could you just take us back in time and just share how you got involved in the beautiful game of soccer?
Yeah, how far back you want to go? But I'll try to give you somewhat of the cliff notes. I'll go all the way back. 1986, I was doing a semester in Paris when I was at UCLA, and France beat Brazil in the quarterfinals in Mexico. And I saw the whole city erupt and then rush out into the street and chant "On a gagné," which means we won. And I was just blown away by that. I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is the Super Bowl World Series rolled into 1 times 10. And that was only the quarterfinal. So that was the first time I really understood what football was. And then in, God, was that 86? Jeez. And then in 89, my classmate from UCLA, Paul Caligiuri, scored the goal against Trinidad and Tobago, which got us into the World Cup for the first time in 40 years. The 1990 World Cup in Italy, where Paul played, the US we were 0-3. I think Italy beat us 6-1. I followed that World Cup in the New York Times because it wasn't on television, which was crazy. I mean, it was on, a couple of the games were on TBS, but the cable penetration back then was like 6%, so nobody saw it. And then in 1994, I got a job, or 93, I got a job at the World Cup organizing committee as the most junior staff lawyer when we first hosted the World Cup. So that was, that was a long time ago. People forget, I mean, we'll talk about how popular soccer is and what's about to happen here. And yet, at that time, that World Cup was a massive success. They sold more tickets to any World Cup ever before or since, huge television ratings. So, this is a soccer super hip right now, but it's been around for a long time.
Yeah, for sure. So you already have experience at the World Cup. I usually ask this towards then. I'll ask it a little bit early on. How do you feel about the 2026 World Cup, and what are you anticipating? I'm asking you to pull out your magic ball here.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever seen John Oliver's bits on the World Cup and FIFA, but I hate FIFA, but I love the World Cup, right? So there's just like, you unfortunately can't separate the two. But as a fan, I don't like the 48 teams. I just think it's kind of ridiculous and it cheapens it. As someone in the soccer industry, I'm stoked about the 48 teams. It just makes it that much bigger. I actually think Lancaster, we'll get into that, but I think Lancaster could host one of those teams. So you got 48 teams coming, tons of Central American, African, and Asian clubs that are not going to be able to afford to make UCLA their home base. And so I think we have a shot of actually hosting a team. And I think it's just going to be just wildly popular, beyond anyone's imagination. And that always happens with the World Cup. There's always a peak and then a trough. And then both men and women, what I always say is that the last trough was always higher than the one before, right? In this point, I think you're going to see the trough is going to be higher than the peak, if that makes sense. In other words, I think this is like the World Cup that puts us into, escape velocity, where there really is never a trough after that. And one thing as a guy doing what I'm doing, when the World Cup's all done, right? Everybody's going to be so into it. You get up on Saturday morning, you watch Liga MX, and then what do? You come to our stadium, you put on our jersey on a Saturday night, and this is your team, and that's how you continue the passion after the World Cup's all said and done. Because people always say, well, the World Cup's going to be big, it's going to be big, but what does it really mean? What does it really mean for soccer in the country. It's what happens afterwards that really matters. And I think as you see all the growth of these, particularly these USL teams in these smaller markets, that's where the payoff is going to be. That's where people are going to pay off their newfound fandom.
For sure. What year do you guys kick off?
We're March of 25.
Okay, so right a year before the World Cup. So you guys are going to be catching that wave and surfing it all the way to the drop. Super excited for you.
Yeah.
I'd love to come out to the stadium when it's up and ready. Um, so how did the idea of the project originate, and what are the key driving factors behind its inception?
Yeah. Well, so I've been in the sports business my whole career, mostly on the media side. I've been 4 or 5 years now. I've just been consulting, advising, and I got approached by some private equity guys that wanted to invest in football teams in Europe. And they were asking me if I could spin up some deal flow for them, which I didn't think I could do because I wasn't really a team guy and I didn't really know anybody at a team. But turned out I was like one handshake away from a lot of clubs in Europe that needed money during the pandemic. And so we looked at a lot of big clubs. We went pretty far down the road. Well, we went very far down the road with a team in the English Championship. Really came to a go decision whether to acquire it. I was going to be the club president. I was going to be commuting to England. It was a little bit not thought out, to be honest. But any event, the private equity guys, the money guys, decided they didn't want to do it. And at that time, we had thought about smaller leagues and development leagues and multi-club platforms and all that sort of stuff. And we talked about USL, but I knew that the stadium in Lancaster, California, was empty. So it's an hour north of my house. It's in Los Angeles County. It was one of the 40 teams that Major League Baseball contracted, and I knew there was empty. It was an empty building. So literally the day that the English Championship Club deal cratered, I called the city of Lancaster, California, and said, I want to convert that stadium from baseball to soccer. And they basically said, yes, okay. And that, it took a year, but over the course of the year, we have a signed 20-year operating agreement to be the principal tenant of the stadium. And we have an agreement we have a master plan to convert the stadium from baseball to soccer. And the vast majority of the funding for that's going to come from the city, which is, they're super aggressive. They want to bring the building back to life and, do that for the community. So it's really, there's a couple of key things. One, I found an empty stadium an hour from my house. So that's about the most sophisticated market analysis that I could do. Turns out it's a great market, 500,000 people, 50% Latino, great super pro business city that wanted to do the deal. And then the stadium economics are just incredibly favorable. And then as it turns out, it'll be only the fourth soccer specific stadium in all of Southern California. And I can give you some stats on why it's ridiculous to think that in Southern California, there are only 3 soccer specific stadiums, professional. And so to get the fourth one is just, it shows you how untapped the market still is. Even on the eve of our second hosting of a World Cup, it's still an untapped market. It's just green field. And I kind of scratch my head going, I just feel lucky that I found this stadium at this time, at this time in relation to the World Cup. I think when we kick off our first game in March of 25 with a sold out soccer stadium in Los Angeles County, people are going to be like, where did that come from? Like, how did we miss that right under our nose?
Right. Yeah, that's phenomenal. So it's going to be a soccer specific stadium. How many seats are you going to have?
5,300 seated. We could get to 6,000 standing.
So are you guys planning to build, and it's going to be a modular stadium?
Yeah. Well, so we're basically keeping the baseball structure that's behind home plate, which is substantial and in great shape. And then we're going to demolish some of the first and third base lines just so that we can straighten it out into a right angle and pull the corner flag really in tight into the corner. So there's a couple examples of this. There's one in Huntsville, Alabama, that has been done this way, baseball to soccer. There's one in New Orleans that's being worked on right now. There's a lot of empty baseball stadiums out there. And so this conversion there's one in Tampa, Florida. this conversion of baseball to soccer, we're actually not making it up. But then, so we keep the infrastructure around home plate effectively, and then we add modular stands on the east touch line and the north touch and the north goal line.
Are you guys planning to have the ability? So when you guys are building out this modular stadium, are you guys planning to expand it later on in the future to enable the stadium to grow to 8,000, 10,000 seats later in the future?
Yeah, there's plenty of room to do that. We could fill in the corners. We could add a second deck along the what is now the third baseline. The behind home plate there already is a second deck, and then we can add one on it'd be the west touch line at the center line. So yeah, so I think we could get to 10,000, 9,000, 10,000. Man, that would be a dream come true if we can sell that many tickets. I definitely think we can sell out the stadium as is, and then this is the Lancaster, Palmdale, the Antelope Valley, it's a growing market. There's aerospace, there's green tech, and there's an exodus of people from Los Angeles, people who live in the city of Los Angeles who simply cannot afford to live there anymore, but they don't want to leave Southern California. So within Los Angeles County, you can move to Lancaster, Palmdale, you can afford a house. And since people don't have to commute every single day to LA anymore because of Zoom, and because there's a ton of industry out there, I think this market's going to grow quickly. So I think you're going to see in 10 years, it could be 750,000 people out there. And then it's getting to be the size of a championship market. So yeah, if we're successful, I think we could get to 9,000. Could we get above that? I don't know. I mean, someday, but I think 9,000 is not such a stretch.
Yeah, for sure. And it's about filling out the stadium. That looks good. Not having too big of a stadium, and not maybe you have 8,000 seats and you're only filling out 4,000. That doesn't look too good. So yeah, for sure. Are you able to actually? I want to dissect a little bit in regards to, it's such a unique story in regards to a phone call away from an empty stadium and then getting this opportunity. So was there an existing relationship there with the stadium owners, or straight cold call, no relationship? You just got on that phone and said, hey, we want to put a soccer team there.
Yeah, crazy, just flat out cold call. Didn't know a soul. But what I did know was that the city owns the building, and so the Jethawks minor league baseball team, their lease was public. So I just found it. I just Googled it and found it and read it, and it was incredibly favorable. And so in my very first meeting, I just walked in and said, I'll just take this lease. Like, I'll just take it. Four corners. I even offered them an increase in the rent because the lease was 10 years old. So I offered them effectively a CPI increase over the 10 years to get to the current rent. And they said yes. And then there was, and for them, they're not trying to make money on the stadium. They want to have a community asset, right? They want to have it alive. And there's economic impact for sure, but there's also just civic pride and something for people to look forward to and be proud of. And since they own the building and it required some capital improvements. I mean, if you went to lease a warehouse and you said, I will lease this warehouse if you put in a refrigeration system, chances are the owner would say yes, right? They want their building to be viable. So for me to go in and say, I will lease this building on these terms if you turn it into a soccer configuration, then they said yes. So for me, I think totally rational for what they did and the right thing for the community. It's just that most cities just don't think that way. It's an attitude that comes down from the mayor on down, which is like, we're progressive, we're solution oriented, we're going to get shit done, for lack of a better, term.
For sure. Do you know how long the stadium was vacant for before you guys got in?
Yeah, so it was, I don't think they ever came back from the 2019 season. So I think the baseball team played, spring, summer, fall of 19. And then they were getting ready to come back to start the 20 season. And that's when the pandemic hit, which makes sense, right? Because it was March of 20. Then they were alive, but they weren't playing. And then it was in that window, 2021, that Major League Baseball contracted the 40 some odd teams. And they were the one that got the axe. So yeah, so it's been effectively empty since 19. They've had some summer league baseball in there, some wood bat baseball. They've had some college baseball, but it's basically been empty since 19.
Got it. So for the fans watching, hopefully somewhere in California on our channel, when can fans start purchasing tickets from your website?
Yeah, so we want to do season ticket deposits starting when we launch our team logo and our team name in March. And then there's a whole, process and science to this, but you do season ticket deposits probably from say March to June, July. And our very explicit goals, we want to get to 4,000 season ticket deposits, which we think we can get to. And then you start converting those into season tickets. We want to get to at least 3,000 season tickets sold, which we think we can do. But here's what I would say. I think I can beat every one of these numbers. Every number, I think we can beat them. But in terms of projections for investors and trying to stay sober and be realistic, that's kind of our goal. 4,000 deposits, 3,000 season ticket sales.
For sure. What's the saying? Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I look, if this is all about, it's really interesting how these things sort of coalesce in your mind. This is a community-based club, right? And what does that mean? That means you're selling tickets locally, you're selling sponsorship locally, and you're developing players locally, which we knew what we would be doing all along. But that, being a community-based team, being in the community, visible, on the fields, in the schools, listening to folks, developing these players. And that's the right thing to do. And it's also the business model. If you contrast that against a development team, and like, not even to pick on, MLS Next Pro, but just look at baseball, that was a Houston Astro farm team. Those players weren't from there. No one asked anybody, every baseball decision. If you're a farm club, every sporting decision is made somewhere else, by someone else, for someone else, right? It's some other player, right? So being a community-based team is really where it's all about. And it's also where all the fun is. It's fun. It's fun to be in the community. It's fun to see the reaction of folks when they hear you bring in a team. So I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but yeah, we're community-based.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. It's something for everyone to get behind and do. So another thing for people to do in the community and be a part of and join and enjoy. Um, Again, soccer is I always say soccer is, as you know, one of those great vehicles to bring people together from all walks of life. Okay, so you got the stadium, and then did you already have existing relationships in USL when approaching the league?
No, I knew people who knew people.
Yeah.
So I was about one phone call away from them. And I think I've had a great experience with the USL. Responsive, interested. As this thing got legs, they got really interested, really leaned in, and now they're our biggest champion is the league office. They're super excited about this deal, helping us raise money. So both the city and the league are just all in on this thing. And that gives the club, it gives us this tailwind and this feeling of confidence that we can get it done, that we will get it done. And then the other thing I would say about the USL, they're very sophisticated. They have tons of resources. Their ticketing is state of the art, their merchandising is state of the art, digital media is state of the art. And they basically say, look, this is how you do it. It's kind of like a franchise in a box. You still have to execute, but
Yep.
you're not making it up as you go. And I have things that I know how to do and things I don't know how to do. And if I didn't have the support of the league, I would be making a lot of stuff up. So it's been a great experience so far.
For sure. There was a question I had. Shoot, in regards to, so you guys got the city, funding the stadium. You guys are putting some funds. What are you guys looking at the league in regard for funding? Is it operational budget, or what type of funding are you guys looking at from the league? And will it be public, from fans, private, or yeah, how are you guys going about that?
Yeah, so the leagues won't provide us any capital, but they do help on the investor front. So they'll help us find investors.
Yeah.
They're also going to be very flexible in how they structure the deal. So ultimately, the club has to purchase the franchise from the league, and there are terms on which that's done, price and payment terms and all sorts of things. And so they can be super flexible on the financing, which takes the burden off the club, and then they can help us find equity. I think they probably could take a small stake as well if they wanted to. they have to be careful about that. But yeah, but they won't. And then they bring resources, right? They've got ahead of ticketing, they've got ahead of football, they've got ahead of everything, right? So those folks are basically coaching my team on how to get everything done. So to have that kind of institutional support is huge when you're new, you're super lean. Again, I have experience with some things, not with others. So having that support's been great.
For sure. So in regards to preparing for operations in 2025, are you guys is the league also helping with that race, or is that something that you guys have to do as a club individually? Um,
The
as
the financial raise.
Yeah, the not the financial race, the yeah, financial race for the operational budget of the
Yeah,
club.
so there's a lot of international money right now that's really interested in the USL, and there's a reason for that. It's because they've realized that the USL is a much more cost-effective and high volume developer of players. And so if you have a multi-club platform, if you've got or if you just own like a second or third, no one's going from USL League One to the English Premier League, for example, because of skill and talent, and also because of that there's a whole point system in England now that's post Brexit. But to take a kid from Southern California, develop him or her, and sell them to a second or third division team in Spain, that's highly viable. And so a lot of European clubs and a lot of multi-club owners are now looking at the USL as very cost effective way to develop players, and also to just get into a market which is, as I mentioned before, just completely untapped. I mean, LAFC and the Galaxy, they can only sign so many players, and for every player they sign, I think there's 10 kids just as good. So anyway, the league has got interest from a lot of big money. Those guys can come in, they can be principal owners, or they can just invest. But for me, I've got a really good group of investors. I've gained a ton of momentum on the investment front just in the last month, and I think I've already got my principal investor. We just got to figure out how we structure the deal. But then if there's money that can follow on after that, that'd be great too.
For sure. I just remembered when you were sharing the story in regards to the cold call, it reminded me of the movie The Big Short. Or no, not the call. It was that you looked into the public stadium. It was public information that you looked at that no one was looking at, but you were the guy to look at it. So it reminded me of The Big Short.
Yeah, I wish I could make as much money on this deal as he made on that. But yeah, sometimes you just got to be resourceful. And I guess I've lived long enough to be resourceful.
For sure. Going back to the stadium, my last question in that regards, I think, location wise, are you guys downtown, or where are you guys located?
Yeah, it's right off the 14 freeway as you head north out of LA, towards Mammoth. But most people know the stadium because most West LA people know the stadium because they drive up and ski at Mammoth, and they drive right by the stadium. You can see right into it. It's about a mile and a quarter, mile and a half from the downtown, which is a little far to walk. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll get the march to the match. If we were 3/4 of a mile or half a mile, I think we might get that. But there's parking, and there's just tons of land out there. There's just so much land. So most folks will drive to the stadium. There's also a rail stop on downtown Lancaster Boulevard that comes up from LA, and we'll run a shuttle from that railway station to the stadium, which is about 2 miles. But I wish it was right on a train station, but it's just not.
Yeah, location is key. To name drop, Chief Real Estate Officer. I think that's still his title. Justin Papadakis. Hopefully, I'm
Yeah,
saying that last name properly.
Papadakis, yeah.
Papadakis. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so he was here last week. I was literally on the phone with him right before I talked to you.
Yeah,
He came out for the press conference. He's very high on this deal. I mean, really just super excited about this deal. And look, I get it. USL selling franchises, and he's a salesman, but I can tell that he's genuinely excited about this deal.
for sure. So I've been listening to a bit more of his interviews in regards to learning that the real estate aspect of it is very important. And I think one thing that he's mentioned also, I think I recently did an interview with Mark McCullers. USL is also not only focused on the stadium, but they're also focused on the home base of the front office and the training
Yeah.
facility. So is that in the plans as well, or?
Yeah, well, one of the remarkably favorable aspects of our lease is that it includes the front office, it includes the both clubhouses, and of course the field. So we have effectively a built-in front office and training center in the stadium. And then Lancaster, yeah, it's great. And then Lancaster has what they call the National Soccer Center, which is a huge complex of grass fields, and that's filled with kids on Saturdays, youth AYSO and all that. But they have what they call the FIFA fields. They have 4 full-size FIFA fields that are grass, that are immaculately kept, and they've basically offered those. We can train there as well. So if we got players beat up from turf, or we're going to play an opponent on grass, we'll be able to train on grass, but at no cost. And then most of the time we'll just be training, at the stadium. But yeah, it's those 3 lines. I mean, it's all public. You can look it up. But we're at about our annual operating cost for the stadium. Well, if you look at the stadium, front office, training center, we're probably at a 25% or less of what most people are paying for that. So it's a real difference maker for us in our business model.
Yeah, for sure. No, John, honestly, this is one of the best deals I've heard so far, and the best stories, like, by far. What role does the local community play in contributing to the success of your club, and how do you actively engage with fans and stakeholders in the area?
Yeah, so the role they play is, we need them to play, and we hope they play, is they'll buy tickets, because that's what this is all about. This is a soccer hotbed, thousands of kids playing. AYSO Area 10D has 5,000 kids playing. And then there's many clubs. Most of the clubs are local, but there's also clubs that have come in from outside the area. They're trying to get more development level soccer played up there. So they're trying to get more into the EA league and the E64 and all these other development leagues. But for the most part, if you want to play, if you want to do ECNL or higher, you've got to go down and play for a club in San Fernando Valley or LA. So that's, a full hour drive down, hour drive back. I mean, it's a lot of driving. So the best kids, there's just not that much opportunity for them to develop. And then generally it's not scouted either, because why would LAFC scout in Lancaster when they can scout in around Cal State LA? There's probably, in East LA, there's probably as many kids as they could ever sign, right? So it's just an overlooked community. What I've said to the folks up there is, we're not going to start our own tuition-based club. So we're not going to go in there, charge tuition, go down to U10, boys and girls. We want to create one nonprofit, 501c3 academy that would be free to play, and would literally have one boys team and one girls team, U16 to U19. If you're good enough, you're old enough. So you're talking about maybe 50 roster spots for the whole valley. And then we want to have a collective, an informal relationship with every single club, where we say, you can create an opportunity for 1 or 2 players a year to come and play at our academy for free. And yes, you will lose that player, but you won't be alone, because other clubs will lose players too. But you're going to turn around and say to those families and prospective families, look, we're a pathway. We have a relationship with the club. We're a pathway to professional. We got 4 of our players last year secured academy spots. And so there's a little bit of, I would say there's some deep rivalries among the clubs there. And there's some suspicion that we're going to maybe compete with a club, or buy a club, or choose a club. And we're not going to do that. So it's really just sitting with people, educating them. And it's really simple why we wouldn't do it, because we would lose money and we would piss everybody off, right? So that's not like we're the greatest guys around. It doesn't make sense for us to do it. So I think it'll take a little bit of time for people to basically trust us and to get comfortable with the notion of, like, yeah, we might poach a player of yours for our academy, but that's good for everybody, right? It's good for the family. It's good for your club. It's good for other kids coming up. And then, just to answer your question, what we've done leading up to this point, which I think has worked, is we just spend hundreds of hours. I mean, look, I'm there every day. Again, it's an hour from my house, but we spent hundreds of hours just sitting with people in coffee shops for months on end, just talking, listening, showing them what we're trying, getting their advice, showing them what we're doing. And I think that's 99% of it is just literally physically being in the community. I think makes a huge difference.
For sure. One thing that always cross my mind when I hear about other soccer academies is like, how come they haven't launched like a professional soccer team themselves? But obviously, there's various reasons. Have you guys started conversations with these club owners already to create those relationships? And
Yeah.
those, yeah,
Yeah, no, we're very far down the line, and we still have some work to do. I think there is a healthy amount of skepticism, maybe. But again, it's just actions will speak louder than words. And by the way, setting up a nonprofit free to play academy is expensive. So we've got to raise that money. We're going to ask all of our sponsors to pledge an additional 10% to the academy. We'll do fundraisers. We'll do black tie. Like, it's not that there's any black tie, that's not a black tie community, but like we'll have to fundraise every year, and we'll also fund from the club. We got to get to maybe $250,000-$300,000 a year to run a program like that. So it's absolutely our goal, but it's not cheap and it's not easy.
got it. So you guys have already secured sponsorship dollars already?
Not hard dollars, but a ton of
Okay.
interest. This, just since I talked to you like 3 weeks ago, and a lot of it was this launch. I mean, it's just been incredible. So we have I got a bunch of sponsor meetings tomorrow, actually. Yeah, that's going to be, I think in terms of the, smaller ones, I think we'll scoop up a bunch of smaller sponsorships, which are super important. And then for the big ticket items, which is stadium naming rights and the front of the jersey, that's going to be, we think that's going to be an aerospace company. All the big aerospace guys are up there. There's a lot of green tech. There's some big industry up there, and those are seven. Well, all in with the stadium and this jersey and everything, that's seven figures. So, the local car dealer is not going to do that. The local brewery is not going to do that. So we think that's going to come from aerospace.
Yeah, some good sponsorship dollars coming in. Um, Given the growing momentum of women's soccer, do you have plans to integrate a women's team or initiatives with your club? And if so, how?
Yeah. So if you look at USL, on the men's side, you've got the championship in League One, championships Division Two, League One's Division Three, and then they have a USL League Two, which is amateur. On the women's side, they have Super League, the new Super League, which is kicking off this upcoming year, which is a Division One league as sanctioned by U.S. Soccer Federation. So it's actually a Division One league, whereas the USL Championship Men's Division Two. The economics are pretty similar, right? So the standards from the U.S. Soccer Federation standards for League One women are not as stringent as League One or Division One men. Still like so many names and everything. But in any event, in my opinion, to be sustainable, for example, if we were a USL Championship club, I think we'd have to be able to sell 7,000-8,000 tickets a game. That means you got to have a certain size stadium, right? I think that's what the economics of the Super League are going to be. So the Women's Super League economics, I think, will be close to the Men's Championship. And I don't know if we're not ready to do that. We're not ready to do that on the men's side or the women's side. And we might be, but we're not now. So there is no Division Two or Division Three women's league in the USL. There's only Division One, which I think is above our head economically. So there is the W League, which they call pre-professional, which I think is frankly amateur. But that's what we are going to launch with. So we're going to launch with a USL W League team. And my goal is to either upgrade to the Super League, or and I have no rational basis for saying this at all, but I'm kind of hope that the W League migrates up to Division Three, the whole league. And then we would have a Division Three men and a Division Three women. Ultimately, I think there's a really interesting gender equity story here in the USL, which is, it's great if you want to go start a women's professional team. Great, go do it. Boston, San Francisco, LA, Angel City. It's great. But it's not really a gender equity story because they're not it's not equal pay for equal work. It's just a women's league, playing a women's schedule, getting women's wages. It's very hard to say, is that equal to the men? It's actually not hard. It's not equal to the men, right? What I like about USL is it's the only league, I think, in any sport in the US where you have a fully professional women's division and a fully professional men's division under one league. And what that gives you the potential to do, the potential is to create a situation where you have equal pay for equal work. That doesn't exist anywhere in the world in any sport, men's and women's divisions with equal schedules, equal work, equal pay. So nowhere in the world does that exist. I think the USL could do that. So I think we could do that in 5 years. We could have a USL men's championship team and a USL women's Super League team with effectively the same payroll and the same schedule. So it's one of the reasons no one's paying attention to it is because it's a very long-winded of saying there's a lot of backstory of why this is a gender equity story. But again, you get to the point where you say, hey, we got 2 teams and they have the identical payroll and the identical workload. I think that's really, really cool.
That's a huge
Yeah,
story.
so that's my goal. But again, it's like anything else. On the women's side and the men's side, we've got to sell tickets. So the fans have got to come out and buy tickets for the women at the same price point as they buy tickets for the men. And the local sponsors have got to sponsor the women at the same rate. But if we do those 2 things, then yeah, we could achieve that.
Yeah, that's a great goal. If you were to offer advice to potential investors interested in owning a professional soccer club, what would be your key recommendations?
Well, assuming you're not a billionaire and you're not going to buy an MLS team, because there's like only 5 guys left on the planet who can actually buy an MLS team. I'm super bullish on USL and their presence in what I would call the next 200 markets. So everybody's fixated on the top 30 markets, the NFL markets, the MLS markets, if you will. It's the next 200 markets where all the growth is going to be. And that's where the USL is. So the USL right now, with its men's and women's pro and amateur, they're in 200 markets across the country. And that's why I'm so bullish on USL. I believe that's where all the growth is going to come, all the development is going to come. And if you compare continental US to continental Europe, we've got like 60 teams in men's division 1, 2, and 3. Europe probably has 600, right? And so think of all those players that are playing in all those small communities all throughout Europe who are being developed and moving on to the bigger clubs. We don't have that. So anyone who wanted to buy a team in the USL right now, I'd say go for it, because that's the growth story. The USL is the growth story in soccer in this country. After that, it gets super market specific super fast. What else is going on? What's the demographic? Are they going to support it? And then you get to the stadium deal, which is really the key. So I kind of felt like if you had a lot more time and money than I do, you could go into a community that maybe wasn't as great or didn't have the great stadium deal, and over time you could make it work. Because I do believe that these smaller markets, these middle markets, are going to be very amenable to soccer. They're going to be very receptive. But it's just it's hard. It's a slog. The fact that I've been able to pull this off the way I have is pretty unique. I can't imagine doing this anywhere else. I just can't even imagine it. So it's probably a richer man's game, unfortunately, or you just got to have very, very, very thick skin.
For sure. What would you say is the last 2 questions? What would you say has been the biggest challenge that you've come across so far?
Fundraising.
Why?
Just the constant evangelism of what this is. Look, this is about long-term enterprise value. It's not cash on cash. So you're not going to, if you're a guy that says, well, I'm making 5% on my investments every year, so you got to show me 7% in this one. That's not what this is. So immediately you rule out probably 90% of the investors you got to find someone who's looking for long-term enterprise value. Then naturally it has to be a soccer fan. I just don't think people would go through the effort if they didn't love the game. And the last thing is they got to be super high net worth. They have to be willing to put a lot of money down and not see that money again for like another 5 to 10 years. So you have those, yeah, and they have to have a connection to the community too. It's just you got to believe in this. You believe in the game, you believe in the community, and then you have to have all those other financial wherewithal. So it's a needle in a haystack. Now, that having said that, we've been able to do it. We've been able to evangelize. People are seeing the traction we have. They're seeing the stadium, and so now I'm looking at the potential that we would even be oversubscribed, which was not the case 6 months ago. But it's not. I've raised a bunch of venture capital for startups. It's a little harder to do this, but not much. I mean, raising money's hard, man. It's just hard. So, and again, thick skin and everything else. So, but that's definitely the hardest part, is just getting people to share your vision and see your vision.
For sure. I'm gonna definitely need some venture capital advice from you. In regards to the capital that you've raised, has it been from family office, private investors, or where has funding come in? You've mentioned investment interest from overseas. So I'm aware of EB5 Capital as a vehicle to secure capital. So could you just share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so my core group of guys all happen to be two are local to LA. One is back east. High net worth individuals, sports, entertainment, media business, smart guys, successful, but soccer fans, guys that want to own a soccer team. So that's my core group of guys, and then we're with their networks of people. That's where we're really starting to get velocity now, because it's not just my Rolodex, it's mine plus plus.
Right.
I would love to have some foreign investment for just a lot of reasons, and I think it's still possible we'll get it, but it hasn't happened yet.
Understood. And then if you don't mind me asking, could you just share in regards to like how it's being structured, like what vehicle you're using to structure it?
Yeah. So we originally started out with a SAFE, which is a simple agreement for equity, which is
How
like
how much did you guys raise with the safe?
that I don't want to say.
Okay, sorry, yeah.
So I don't want to get into specific dollar amounts, but
Yeah.
So you're familiar with safes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a safe is just convertible note, really. It's just that the fiction of the note that no one ever really calls in the note. No one ever calls the loan in, right? That's why they got rid of the convertible notes and just called them safes. It's a great way to raise seed capital. People don't know what the price per share is, but they know they're going to get a discount, and so they feel comfortable about that. And that's a good way to do it. We may, now that we have a significant amount of investment, we may actually roll those safes into a priced sort of seed round. Like, there's different ways you could structure it, but that's all now that we have so much momentum, we have so much interest. Me and my original guys are like, okay, what's the best way to structure this? It may not in the end be a safe, but I would say to start, safes are great. You're at that point, people are just investing in you at that point. They're like, I like this guy. I think he can do it. I'm going to give him a little money. And I know that when we do our first price round, I'm going to get a discount. So it's I highly recommend them. Where you finally net out could be different, but it's a great place to start.
Got it. And it's fast. Those were all the questions. Was there anything like I missed or that you wanted to add in?
Yeah. So you see this in some of these interviews, but because we had spent all this time in the community and we continue to, we had a list of 65 people that we had met with one-on-one. And these are all, mostly soccer folks, but also teachers, school board members, community organizers. And so when we did our press conference last Wednesday at 10 a.m. at the stadium, we knew that most of our supporters couldn't go. So because they're in school at work, we decided to have a party for our supporters last Friday night. We invited those 65 people. That's who we invited. 650 people showed up.
Wow.
Including a full-on supporters group with a name, flags, drums, smoke bombs, tifo. We unveiled a tifo inside the venue, dropped a tifo from the ceiling. It was phenomenal. And we don't have a name, we don't have a logo, we don't have colors, and all these folks, showed up in support of this thing. So that was really the thesis, is that the same level of passion you see at LAFC and Galaxy, because I do believe that LAFC has energized the Galaxy fans. That level of passion we believed existed in the Antelope Valley. And really it was about going out there and tapping into that, albeit in smaller numbers. We're not going to have 3,000 in our cheering section. We're going to have 500. So this party was our first sort of empirical data point that, like, yep, we're right. That those people were there. They're waiting for this team. And all we had to do was open the door, and they came in. Now, we still have to execute, and we have to not F it up, and we have to do all the right things, but that fan base is there. And that's kind of the magic. That's the magic of this whole thing. Like, you write a business plan, but how do you explain the 3252 cheering section? You go to LAFC game and you see those guys. How do you explain that? I mean, there's people say, oh, we're shoulder to shoulder, we're in the community. It's like, okay, but what does that even really mean, right? So there's like this leap of faith. And that's what we thought was there in Lancaster. So now we have this one little proof point that, yeah, we're right, that passion is there, the fan base is there, and that's going to convert to ticket sales and everything else.
Sure. Well, I'm super excited to see this come to life, and hopefully attend the game soon in the future. We're at the end here with the last 5 speed fun questions.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
John, you got to answer these quick.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is your favorite food?
My mom's spaghetti.
Favorite movie?
Rudy.
Favorite activity?
Soccer.
Favorite music artist?
Kiss.
Messi or Ronaldo?
Messi.
Oh,
Messi by a mile. Yeah.
This is great, John. Before we go, I'd like to thank you for taking the time for joining me on the One Soccer Nation podcast today.
Yeah, cool. Glad to be here and happy to come back on from time to time and let you know how we're doing.
For sure. Thank you.